Welcome to the podcast. This is Beyond Motion, where we explore human performance and dive into the latest innovations of research and stories shaping the field of biomechanics. My name is Zach Scarano. I'm the Director of Product Management here at Noraxon.
And I'm Lindsey Hennington. I'm the Support Manager and Applications Engineer here at Noraxon.
And today we are going to be talking about our new 2D markerless engine that allows for 2D video analysis to be completed within our new MR4 software. So 2D markerless, I mean, what is it? Like, you probably get that question a lot.
What is it? Yeah, I mean, I think it's better, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Sure,
right?
It is, yeah.
Totally, yeah. We'll maybe put some clips on top of this to show exactly what it looks like. But I think the biggest distinction is that we already have a 3D motion capture system. And this is a 2D video analysis system, more or less. With, so it's not quite as accurate, quite as good as the 3D motion capture, but it serves other purposes. It helps streamline that information. And the markerless aspect of it, right, we could always do 2D marker-based tracking, but the markerless engine that we've built into the MR4 software is what is really the new product that we're delivering that's allowing us to use these tools.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the predecessor, just being our regular video analysis tools, which you could use with the reflective markers, they had some utility from time to time, but I think it was somewhat of a challenging thing for people to use, and in a sense that you had to put the markers on the landmarks, you had to record the video, you had to create the drawings, you had to track the drawings, and then you could start to use some of the data. And I think another big, huge aspect, with the markerless system is not only making that process easier, but we also added the contact detection.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it effectively turns this into like a gait analysis system or a running analysis system, right?
Yeah, where all you need is a camera or multiple cameras.
Yeah, and a treadmill, right?
Yeah.
I think, those two distinctions of, if we separate those out, right? 2D, 2 dimensions. So it's just giving us, these plane angles in either the sagittal or the frontal planes. So there's no option of looking at rotations in the transverse plane. But then the majority, it seems like, from a biomechanics standpoint, those planar angles are going to be the primary parameters that people are looking for when they're analyzing walking and running, and maybe even some other more simple movements for range of motion purposes. I guess the 3D side of it, the transverse plane, is definitely important, no doubt, but doesn't always make its way into any sort of practical analysis, because it is harder to understand kind of what the effects of that third dimension or the transverse plane are actually having on somebody's movement.
Certainly.
And then I think the markerless piece of it really is just streamlining this whole thing. So not having to touch the patient or the subject, right? You can just get them onto the treadmill with your cameras already in position, click go, and then you have that video. You've got everything that you need to be able to perform that analysis. And so I think it makes it a much more accessible tool for people, and hopefully serves as a really good entry point for us, for a lot of people.
This tool is really aimed at that applied market to, deliver what most people are interested in, which is those planar angles for the most part. Not to say that the transverse plane isn't very important. It's just, this is really our way of delivering that ultra simplified system.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's not necessarily the most accurate tool in the biomechanics marketplace or industry, but that's not necessarily the goal of it either, right? It really is meant to be something that really opens the doors for people to start to use biomechanics and specifically kinematics to look at analysis of movement.
For sure.
And we've determined with many of our customers and those that aren't our customers, but hopefully will be in the future, that what they're looking for is just that good enough, right? They want information. They want it to be repeatable.
They want it to be actionable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is definitely a tool that delivers that. Is it going to be completely accurate every single time? Maybe not. I mean, there's certainly going to be ways or options for correction. And I think that's another aspect of how we have it in our software, is that we do give the users the control there. So when they are doing that, point of interest analysis, they can make that correction. They can fix an angle and have it be adjusted, for that point in time that they want to analyze. And so I'm hoping that kind of people can really understand that utility of, making things very fast and easy and accessible. And then, of course, having that control to make it more accurate, when maybe the tracking does fail a little bit for one reason or another.
Yeah. So with that in mind, talking about tracking failing for one reason or another, maybe we should talk a little bit about the setup requirements here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the only requirement, as we specified, is at least one camera and a treadmill, right? So, but that camera has to be set up very specifically in the right way, because that is your measurement tool. The camera is the one seeing what the person is, and the software is just drawing the angles, and estimating the position.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's that camera setup in particular is the most crucial aspect of it. And camera setup, of course, encompasses a lot of different things. It's not just where is it physically placed, but it's how's it handling the light conditions, what's the frame rate that's being utilized, and we have that guide that we put together that kind of goes through each of those points. But certainly I think it's worth mentioning it in this format as well, that we want that camera position perpendicular to the movement that you're measuring. So if you are looking at the sagittal plane, it should be perfectly 90 degrees from that sagittal plane as best as you can, leveled so that it's not tilted one way or another, up or down or left or right. So you want it to be that kind of straight shot, to the side of the individual, and that's going to give you the best, most reliable data. And frame rates, I think, is interesting, because we've definitely seen that it works with 30 frames per second or 60 frames or 120 or 300, whatever options that we've got. There is somewhat of a consensus, it seems, as far as frame rate for running analysis, and that 100 plus frames per second, likely preferred 120 frames per second or more, is going to be the best, just to be able to capture that movement adequately.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction to make too, is the purpose of having the high frame rate of 100 plus or 120 is not to make the tracking better, because we've established the tracking will track regardless of a low sample rate. But it's more so to make sure that you're capturing every part of that running gait cycle that you're looking at adequately. What you're looking at is initial contact, not like 5 frames after initial contact, because the camera wasn't capable of capturing that exact moment. Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, I think other aspects, of course, like we mentioned a treadmill, but that would really only be relevant if somebody was measuring walking or running. Hopefully in the future we support some overground options, but right now it's just in more or less a stationary position. And so a treadmill helps facilitate that. Of course, if you're just looking at like simple range of motion, then as long as they're in front of the camera and again kind of perpendicular to that plane, then you should be good. Another thing that we've been going back and forth on too, I think, is like, what does the rest of the environment need? In terms of contrast between the subject and the environment that they're in, or clothing type, or things like that. And fortunately, it seems that the tracking is pretty resilient to a lot of those different conditions, but there is definitely some recommendations there.
Yeah. So, I mean, just some big ones that I've seen, wearing black shoes where the treadmill running surface is black.
Yeah.
Causes some issues sometimes. It is pretty resilient, you're right, to clothing types, but as always, try to have the system work less hard if you can, right? So, I mean, the lighter clothing that shows those wrinkles a little bit more easily than just all black.
Yeah. Yeah, what were we joking around the other day talking about somebody wearing a morph suit?
Yeah, just wear like that green screen morph suit.
Yeah, I wonder how that would. We got to bring that in one day and just try that out and see if that how that works. Yeah, we'll get a couple of them and see which color is the best. But oftentimes I think what people ask about in terms of clothing too is then like is skin color too. Like, is there an effect based off of the type of person that's on being captured? And the engine that we've implemented is Google's media pipe pose. And so that was really nice to be able to see that they ran through, a whole bunch of different ethnicities when they were doing the training. So, yeah, a couple different things about it, but it looks like, what they talk about is the training factors and subgroups. And so the groups, were samples that were evenly distributed among 14 geographic subregions. So everywhere from Central America to the Caribbean to Australia to Europe to Asia and to Northern and Middle and Southern Africa. So like all over to be able to capture data on here. And what they talk about, so their data, it was 1,400 samples evenly distributed across the 14 geographical subregions. And they have, very detailed results, but basically the scores for everywhere were all above 85, which that was their fairness criteria, was that it had to be above that in order for it to be something that they would produce. And so, that was pretty neat to be able to see that they were able to do that. And so, in this case, let's say performance, photos data set results in average performance of 94%. So it was much higher when they averaged it all out for their performance for the full model, which was, pretty neat to see. And so I think, even just utilizing a tool set that is developed by this major technology corporation, I think it kind of gives us a base layer of reliability that we can really trust in when implementing it.
Well, and there have been validation studies on this media pose engine as well. So it was nice for us to be able to just jump in with it and not have to do any of this investigation that it might take to validate a new technology before integrating it. Yeah,
and I think, aside from that, the unfortunate aspect of that maybe is that like we can't necessarily train a new model to do something ultra specific to like what our customers might want, but it definitely is very beneficial to kind of the general use case that we're applying with these running and walking and general range of motion analyses. But like, of course, we've already gotten requests for things like we want to just be able to track like the lower body, or even more so like just the foot. And I say that's we can't do that, right? We can't update the training set that's been used for this particular model, but it's really interesting to see kind of how people want to start to use this stuff once they kind of get that first exposure to it, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's all helpful feedback for sure, because it influences how we prioritize the future, right? So, but it is always interesting how when you first release a product, a lot of the initial feedback you get isn't, I like this or not. It's like, oh, can it do this other thing?
Yeah. That's good. That's how we keep improving, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But I mean, as far as other setup requirements, again, it's pretty easy. Like as long as you abide by some of those main guidelines, like it kind of works for you pretty well. But I love what you said when you're like, don't make it work extra hard, right? So,
Yeah.
definitely think critically about what's going on, and if it's any of these things, right? Any technology is not like magic. Well, maybe it is to some people, but
Yeah.
there's always faults, right? There's always things that it struggles with and doesn't do well, and I think that's something to make sure that people continue to consider, no matter what the technology is, because you've got our laptops here. They crash from time to time too, right?
Oh yeah. Well, as far as considerations, as far as setup goes, I think this is pretty minimal compared to the other technology that we have. I mean, probably not something like a force plate where
Right.
that it gets initially teared by the software before you use it and you're good to go. But like EMG, our 3D IMU based motion capture system, all incredible requirements that can end up being very complex during that setup process. If you're not paying close attention to what you're doing, and that can have these implications to what your data looks like later. But as far as the 2D Markerless engine, you have one measurement modality, you have that camera, and as long as that's set up correctly, then you should be pretty good to go to be able to record whatever it is you're doing, as long as it falls within the realm of possibility for this 2D engine.
Right.
And maybe we should just talk about examples of what those things are. I mean, we've more or less said it has to be planar or perpendicular to the camera, but let's give everyone some clear examples.
Yeah. I think the main ones, right? The kind of most popular use cases are going to be walking and running, which we said should be performed on a treadmill, so that their location remains in front of the camera or cameras. And then past that, I think we've talked about some general range of motion tasks, squats,
like arm raises,
yeah, leg raises, right?
Lunges.
These activities that are going to do not typically require much rotation in the transverse plane in particular.
And you can't be moving in and out of the frame as well. You've got to stay pretty much stationary right in front of the camera.
Yep. Yeah, you want to be centered in that in the position and be able to not go towards the edges of that camera view, because we've seen that of course that starts to skew those angles, and it's kind of in that case, right? It's just even though the subject is still in view, when they get to those edges, because all these camera lenses, right, are all these like wide angle lenses, and so it actually is skewing the view of the individual, towards the edges, and pretty much as an example of like that parallax error, which is the same as if you had the camera tilted up or you had it turned to the right and the person was on the left side of it, and so keeping them as stationary to the middle of the camera frame is best. One thing I think we forgot to mention too is like cropping. So we want to be able to see the full body of the individual.
Right, no cutting off someone's head.
Exactly, yeah. So that's part of the way that the image processing or the computer vision takes into account, is they identify certain body landmarks, and the head is a very important one for where the model kind of starts. So it builds this top-down type of model, and so identifying landmarks on the head are really key. The ear, the eyes, things like that. And aside from that, I think being as tight of a crop as you can, where you can see the whole body, and really eliminate any sort of external, environmental things is important as well. And that's just going to make the best image possible, give you the most resolution for, the space that you're capturing. But it also, I think, helps from a tracking standpoint too, just to be able to create, a more smooth look than if you were really far out and it looked like somebody was, this little miniature person.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, our customers are using those images to be able to draw conclusions about their patient's movement or whoever the subject is, right? And if you're going to be sharing that information with any stakeholder, it should look like you can see them and not like, oh, you're all the way over there where these tiny angles drawn on that person.
Yeah,
the back of the room.
Yeah, and I think the data is one thing, but as we've seen time and time again, video representation and the quality of that image that's pretty much how people are going to judge your service, right?
100%.
Like, you could have the best data possible, but if you include a video or an image from that video and it's blurry or it's skewed or the lighting's wrong or whatever, that is what they sort of see as the representation of the technology that you're using. So, that's my advice to many users is like set up the environment as if it's something that you want to see. Like, think of the way that somebody might set up a photo studio or something like that. And you don't necessarily have to go to those lengths, but clean backgrounds, things of that nature, to be able to just make a good quality image that you're proud to be able to share, and then of course is going to give really good information on the back end too.
Right. Yeah, it's step 0 before we even get to like step 1, placing the camera.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the 2D markerless video analysis is not new technology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, we've stated that we've implemented this engine from somewhere else as well. But maybe we can focus a little bit on how is the way that we've integrated it into our software different from other 2D video analysis tools out there in the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to Markerless, actually many of the Markerless systems out there it's 3D, right? Like, that's usually what they're promoting, whether that be using multiple cameras to kind of construct a 3D environment, or even you see some of these handheld app-driven products that are creating a 3D model based off of a single camera, which is interesting. But, pretty neat. And so I would think, the first thing that we did, of course, is we restricted it, right, just to be this 2-dimensional data, with the understanding that the transverse plane data is just not going to be very reliable. And it was important for us to be able to bring something to the market that our customers could align with the rest of our technology, which, we have a very high trust factor in the marketplace. And I think, delivering something like this, we wanted to maintain that, even though there's an understanding that like video analysis in general is going to be, have its a little bit more of an error range than, let's call it a 3D system or any marker-based system even.
Yeah, 100%. It's not that 3D aspect doesn't exist. It's just that we, again, have a very high trust factor with our customers, and we don't want to deliver something that we feel is subpar. Yeah,
and then I'd say, aside from that, of course, our software is on a laptop or on a Windows computer. That could be a desktop too. And then you've got your cameras that are these external devices which are connected to that computer. And so you might see other tools that are out there that are driven by the camera on a tablet or a phone. And then, of course, the software lives on that as well, which certainly adds a level of convenience. But I think, where we differentiate ourselves with those, of course, is one, being able to set up these cameras, right, so that they're fixed. They're in a fixed position. You don't have to worry about coming in and setting up your tablet or your phone in the same spot every time and getting a good position on that, or even holding it and risking the fact that maybe you are slightly skewed or turned or not positioning the person in the right spot on the camera view. But the cameras can be fixed into their positions and set up the same way every single time. Of course, we can do multiple views, right? So we can do up to 4 cameras.
And they all sync together,
They all
too.
synced, exactly. So you're capturing everything all at once, versus even having to do multiple takes, let's say from the side and then the back and then the other side and so on.
Right. You don't have to evaluate everything individually. You get the whole picture.
Yeah. So that's a big piece of it. And then, from the software standpoint, just being able to capture that database, right? And build that up over time, generate the reports to be able to track the metrics of interest and look at that change over time, or that history, for those. And so, I mean, from there, it's, really then about, okay, well, what do you want to do next, right? Because a big advantage for us in general is really that scalability of our system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're using these cameras now, and we're able to do this type of analysis, but what's past that? Is there something else that I want to add in? Maybe it's pressure distribution. So you have the opportunity to add in an instrumented treadmill, or you have an opportunity to add in in-shoe pressure measurement. Maybe it's other kinetics. You want to look at jump analysis, and you want to look at force plates.
Sure.
And so being able to incorporate that, or it's any of our sensor-based products, so looking at muscle firing patterns as it relates to somebody walking or running on the treadmill. So how are the muscles firing relative to what's going on in the gait cycle? And so in my opinion, I think this serves as like a really good stepping stone for people that just want to start to get technology integrated into their their day-to-day use. And it's something that's very well understood. People get it. All stakeholders really get it. Like, they see the videos of themselves. They see the drawings of the angles on there. Maybe they look at the report and they can see, if you're looking at the powers running assessment, for instance, they can see kind of where they fall within on the scoring. But even so, I think looking at like some of the graphics, they see an image of themselves and how their body's positioned. And then you, as the provider, can kind of talk to them about why does this mean this or that, right? And then what are we going to do about it?
Making biomechanics more accessible.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think, past that, though, there's that next layer, right? You start to uncover a bit more needs for incorporating this stuff into your day-to-day. And so this kind of is that stepping stone for people to get this technology going, start to get information, get used to using information to drive their decision making, and then we give them opportunities to kind of grow from there. So that's something that I love talking about with our equipment, because one thing that we've said in the past, right, but it's like no dead ends. Like, we don't want people to get to a point and then be like, okay, well, I have to go somewhere else now to be able to achieve, this next step. We want them to be able to kind of develop and grow within our current system.
Yeah, and that's really a big reason that a lot of our current customers keep coming back to us, is they have gotten comfortable with the technology that they're using, whether that's in an EMG sensor, force plates, etc. And they're like, I'm ready for the next step. I want to continue to integrate more knowledge about how this person is moving and use that in my toolbox here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's certainly a really important thing to showcase about our software in general. Is like the 2D Markerless is not a product that's new or something that we've developed, but the real utility is having it in this all-in-one biomechanics analysis software. Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think, of course, the add-on or the addition of the powers running assessment, right, is the next stage of that too, which has been super exciting to sort of bring to market. And we've been working with Dr. Chris Powers for a long time now, primarily for EMG biofeedback stuff, but had an opportunity to work with him to develop this assessment, or rather integrate his assessment into our software to kind of take this more automated approach. And so that's, really exciting to bring to the market and see, how it performs, and, start to let people get exposure into like the work that he does. When it comes to running analysis, and he carries a big name already, but I think with having a technology that he can also start to reference, it's going to maybe help his business grow as well, and sort of produce or push out that education, a little bit more easily than it had been in the past.
Right.
Because of the tools that he was promoting. I mean, it was general, right? It was just video analysis, but it wasn't necessarily one thing or another. But now that his, this is sort of integrated into the system, I think, it gives him the opportunity to say, like, here's how you can use this tool to, have a greater effect on your patients or your clients that you're working with to understand and analyze their running biomechanics.
Yeah, definitely. And the Powers Running Assessment is really the first time that we as a company have integrated any sort of good, bad indication into our software. Whereas for the most part, over the years, we've prided ourselves on just having good quality data and being able to boil it down into parameters or statistics, whereas, the user has the opportunity to interpret that information by themselves or customize some aspects of the report that aid them in that comparison to a reference range. But I think that's what's really exciting about the Powers Running Assessment is it adds that layer of interpretation. And also, I mean, that's unique about our 2D markerless system as well, is we're the only one that's incorporated Dr. Powers' assessment.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's extremely exciting to all of our applied customers out there, physical therapists who want to just jump in and take the next step.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see, not necessarily the Powers Running Assessment, but definitely the markerless tracking. I'm excited to see how it gets utilized in academics. Because so many of our customers are using our systems to educate their students, whether that be in PT schools or exercise science or kinesiology programs at the universities. And, they've really enjoyed kind of the ease of use of the software and even, using some of the hardware like for EMG or force plates or the pressure distribution. But being able to incorporate, some simple kinematics into that educational process, I think is going to be really interesting and really impactful for those students. Not only to maybe start to understand some of these concepts, the kinematic concepts, whether it be related to gait or walking or running gait, or other, types of these planar movements, but then does it open the doors for them to also be able to create their own projects, very easily, right? Because I think that's another exciting piece of it, whether that be undergraduate research or, lab projects or even graduate level research as well.
Yeah. I think it's really exciting to see that our technology is being used more and more in that educational capacity.
Yeah.
Like even just say the last 5 years, we've seen more adoption of our technology in general into these physical therapy schools or exercise science programs, because those students have the need to understand how technology can aid them in working with clients or patients, and it's not just a researcher's world anymore. So it's been really exciting just to see the teachers out there in universities understand that and try to teach the next generation of little biomechanists.
No, but I think that's a really interesting point that you made, because we have seen our systems and our technology be implemented into the classroom, more so I think in the last probably 5 years than it had been in the past. And, this type of technology in general, or rather any technology, is something that all these students are so used to using and have exposure to in all other places within their life. And then, they get into these programs and they're working with data sets or research that have certainly been made up with, different technology, but they don't necessarily get exposure to them unless they get past, a certain graduate level or they have to go work at a certain lab or something like that. And I think that, our tools have started to break down that barrier for them to where educators, teachers are feeling comfortable and confident in that, like, okay, we can bring this into this classroom, and inside of, the 1 hour or 2 hours that they have, they can start to use that equipment. And, the Markerless, I think really adds another level to that because, again, it's like just video. Like, go stand in front of this camera and go and perform this movement and, capture 15 seconds, and then we'll, spit this out into look at these kinematics, in under a minute.
Exactly.
So, I think that's going to be a really neat thing to see how it plays out in that space, in addition to, of course, the sort of more practical use cases in clinics and things like that.
100%. And from my perspective as well, just coming from support and having to support our customers because maybe they're misusing technology or they don't understand the proper way to set it up. Just introducing technology when these students are in school and not only teaching them the situations in which it could be used, but the situations in which it can fail, just helps these people, these students that are going to grow up and be whatever, physical therapist, a biomechanist, a researcher, someone else. Just knowing what you're working with and what the limitations and capabilities of that technology is super important in adopting it into whatever you're doing next.
Yeah, definitely maintaining that critical thinking, right? And, those are going to be the best educators that teach people how to think, not necessarily what to think. And it reminds me of, we were talking to our interns a few weeks ago, and we were asking them about, with ChatGPT and like these, AI bots that are out there.
Yeah.
Like, how has that changed the landscape, for somebody in university and going through this? And like, are teachers cracking down on it? Are they embracing it? And they, one of them had told a story about how his teacher had used it, like they totally embraced it, but they wanted to have the students go through an exercise to showcase how it fails.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting, kind of scenario, and something that definitely, like, these tools, right? They're going to have their faults in them, and so being able to think critically about, okay, well, what is going to cause a problem or be a difficult or be a challenge for this tool to perform, and understanding those limitations, like you said, is only just going to make them be able to use it better. And and so that's a really interesting point. I don't necessarily know how we can promote that with our customers, but I hope that they come across that conclusion on themselves for sure.
Exactly. It's nothing that's like the exciting marketing thing to promote, of course, but I do have those. Yeah, I do have those discussions with customers when they first start using the technology, and even with educators, like when I'm teaching them how to calibrate the motion system properly, for example, and they do something incorrectly, and it's simple, right? It's like put the pelvis sensor backwards. A really common fault that can cause a lot of errors. Like, learning exactly what those things are that cause that to happen just makes you more resilient when like random things do happen. It doesn't mean like, oh, it looks wrong, I guess we gotta put it all away and try again. So people do learn that as they're working with technology, and it's really on the shoulders of educators who are teaching students how to use the technology, but also us. We're teaching all of our customers how to use the technology, understand the technology and what it's supposed to do, what it's capable of doing, and understand what those requirements are to get good, reliable, repeatable data.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think going forward, we're going to continue to improve, and hopefully the models that we use, or the engine that we use, gets a new version, and we can, very easily drag and drop that into the software and make improvements there. And, maybe there's opportunities for other more distinct models to be used as well.
Yeah.
I think that's something to be investigated for sure. In addition to things like, capturing in real time, right? That's a big one. I'm sure you've probably gotten that request already.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a thing that people want to have for sure.
And, use that real-time tracking for feedback purposes, or, whatever the case might be. we already touched on it, but being able to support other applications like overground gait, for instance, is a big target. Eventually, maybe there's a way for us to incorporate the transverse plane if we've, have multiple cameras or something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of neat opportunities for us to continue to expand and develop this tool. But I'm definitely excited for where it is now and kind of getting that out into the marketplace and letting people play with it and start to break it down and understand the best use cases for it. And then again, like where are maybe the not so best use cases. And of course, we'll try to help guide people along the way if we can. But no, it's a really neat to be able to implement this into our software and kind of have dip our toes in this space, so to speak.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be here for sure because we're just starting to release this brand new product, and there are lots of different ways that we can go about improving it or enhancing it in the future.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think that's a good ending point.
Yeah.
Thanks for the discussion, and thank you all for joining us. Of course, if you want to be notified of new episodes, make sure that you subscribe on all your favorite podcast platforms that you love, and follow us on social media. We are at Noraxon USA on all of the platforms.
That's right.
And if you need any more information, you can always go and visit our website at www.noraxon.com. I hope everybody has a great day.